I always thought Christmas revealed who loved you, but that night it showed me who never did. I picked up my phone without thinking, just trying to escape the quiet of my apartment, when a new notification flashed across the screen, a Christmas post from my parents. I opened it casually, and the breath left my chest. There they were, sitting around a beautifully decorated dinner table, warm lights glowing across the room, red and gold ornaments perfectly arranged, everyone smiling like they belonged in a holiday magazine. But no matter how many times I looked, I couldn't find myself in a single photo. Not one chair was left for me. Not one hint that I even existed in that celebration. They hadn't called me. They hadn't texted me. They hadn't invited me. They had celebrated Christmas without me and posted it proudly for the world to see. Before the shock could settle, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my mother. Send $1,400 for Christmas expenses. No hello. No explanation. No acknowledgement that I wasn't there. Just a demand, typed like I was nothing more than their financial backup plan. I stared at that message, the silence around me suddenly heavier than the winter air outside. They didn't want me there. They just wanted me to pay for the celebration I wasn't even part of. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Quietly. Firmly. They had no idea what I was about to do next. Looking at that message, I felt something familiar crawl up my spine, the same feeling I'd carried my whole life. Because this wasn't new. If anything, it was predictable. I could list 100 moments where I waited for them to remember me, but they only remembered what they could take from me. Birthdays where they forgot, school events where no one showed up, achievements that were brushed aside with a distracted nod. But the moment they needed money, help, or someone to clean up a mess they didn't want to deal with, suddenly I was the first number they called. Meanwhile, my sister was the sun they revolved around. She got the celebrations, the praise, the gifts wrapped in shiny paper. I got responsibility disguised as love. She was the daughter worth showing off. I was the daughter expected to keep everything together quietly. I grew up understanding one thing clearly. In our family, affection wasn't shared, it was assigned. And my role had never been the loved one. I had always been the reliable one, the fixer, the background character they turned to only when something needed to be carried. So no, it didn't surprise me that they left me out of Christmas. What surprised me was how calmly I finally saw the truth. They'd never forgotten me. They just never cared to include me unless I was useful. I looked at the Christmas photo again, not out of pain this time, but clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw it for what it truly was, not an accident, not forgetfulness, not a misunderstanding. They didn't forget me. They planned without me. They built a celebration where my presence wasn't just unnecessary, it was unwanted. And yet, they still expected me to pay for it. That was the moment something inside me finally stopped bending. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop, not to transfer money, not to apologize for something I didn't do, and definitely not to ask why they left me out. I opened it to choose myself, maybe for the first time ever. As the screen lit up the room, I felt the shift settle into my bones. I wasn't going to be their backup plan anymore, the quiet solution to problems I never created. I wasn't going to be the person they remembered only when there was a bill to pay or a responsibility to dump on me. For the first time, the decision was mine, and it wasn't going to be the one they expected. When I finally opened the attachment my mother sent, I expected, at the very least, for it to make sense. Maybe they bought food, maybe decorations, maybe something small for the house. But as the document loaded, the truth unfolded line by line, sharp and insulting. It wasn't Christmas expenses at all. Not even close. It was my siblings' shopping receipts, designer clothes I'd never seen, salon appointments I hadn't heard about, overpriced holiday decorations I never touched, and a brand new phone that clearly wasn't for me. They hadn't asked me to help. They expected me to fund everything they wanted but didn't want to pay for. They celebrated a Christmas I wasn't invited to, posted it for everyone to admire, and then sent me the bill for the parts one never took part in. The entitlement was so loud it almost drowned out my own breathing. I stared at the list, the total amount glowing back at me like a joke gone too far, and something inside me solidified, cold, steady, unshakable. I opened a new message and typed slowly, letting every word settle in my chest. I will not be paying for this. The sentence felt like a door closing gently but firmly. But I didn't press send. Not yet. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't just refusing a payment, I was refusing a lifetime of being their silent solution. And what I planned to do next wasn't a reaction. It was closure. The kind they would never see coming. I didn't close my laptop. Instead, I opened another folder, the one I'd avoided for years. A quiet archive of every time they'd turned me into their convenience. Old bank transfers. Screenshots of messages asking for a little help. Receipts for bills that weren't mine. 13 times. 13 separate moments where they needed something, and I stepped in without question, without thanks, without ever being acknowledged. As I scrolled through them, it felt like watching a documentary of my own neglect. Each screenshot was a reminder of how often I had been there for a family that rarely showed up for me. The truth wasn't shocking, it was exhausting. And freeing. I selected the entire folder, every proof of the way they had used me, and attached it with steady hands to a group chat they never expected to hear from me in again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but this time, there was no hesitation. I typed, "You celebrated without me. From now on, pay without me." The words looked clean, final, almost peaceful. I hit send. The message left instantly, a tiny whoosh that felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. Before their replies could arrive, before the guilt, the anger, the manipulation could come flooding in, I opened the settings and blocked the entire group in one swift motion. No second guessing. No looking back. For the first time, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It felt like air. Like freedom. Like the beginning of a life where my worth wasn't measured by what I could pay for. The chaos started faster than I expected. Within minutes of blocking the group chat, my phone lit up with missed calls, first from my father, each one angrier than the last. Then my siblings' messages poured in, full of accusations, twisting the narrative the way they always did. "You're selfish, you ruined everything, how could you do this on Christmas?" As if I had been the one to erase them from a holiday, not the other way around. And then came my mother's guilt-soaked texts, soft sentences crafted to make me feel like the villain. "We just needed your help. Families should support each other. You know how hard things are." But not once, not one time, did anyone ask why I wasn't at the table in the first place. Not one question about where I spent Christmas night. Not one message acknowledging their silence. They weren't upset because I left. They were upset because I stopped being useful. I placed my phone face down, letting the vibration buzz against the table until it finally went still. For once, I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't fold. The silence I gave them was the silence they had always given me. By evening, the knocking began, sharp, angry, impatient. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Their voices murmured on the other side of the door, frustration slipping through the cracks like cold air. My father's firm tone. My siblings' whining outrage. My mother's trembling attempt to soothe the situation. They expected me to rush, to open the door, to fix the mess they had created for themselves. But I stood still. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, didn't even consider reaching for the handle. Let them knock. Let them wait. For the first time, they were feeling the consequences of their choices, not me. And as I watched the shadows under the door shift angrily before finally disappearing down the hallway, I realized something. They weren't here because they loved me. They were here because they lost control of me. And I had no intention of giving it back. When the knocking finally stopped and the last echo of their voices faded from the hallway, an unfamiliar calm settled over my apartment. It felt like the world had exhaled with me. I walked deeper into my home, my steps slow, steady, almost weightless, as if 1,000 invisible hands that had been pulling at me my entire life had suddenly let go. Instead of replaying their anger or imagining their disappointment, my mind was quiet, almost serene. I opened my food app and, for the first time in a long while, ordered exactly what I wanted without worrying about anyone's opinions, tastes, or judgments. While I waited, I lit the candles scattered around my living room, soft, warm light blooming against the walls, turning my small space into something gentle and safe. The apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a place where I finally belonged. When dinner arrived, I sat at the little table by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching snow fall in slow, delicate spirals under the streetlights. The world outside seemed calm too, as if it was acknowledging this quiet shift inside me. Each bite of food tasted richer than it should have, maybe because for once, I wasn't disappearing behind someone else's needs. I wasn't shrinking myself to keep the peace. I wasn't being the responsible one who held everything together. I was simply me. The silence around me didn't feel like punishment. It felt like the first moment of peace I'd had in years. I leaned back in my chair, letting the warmth of the candles flicker against my skin, and realized something life-changing. I wasn't celebrating Christmas alone. I was celebrating freedom. Freedom from being used. Freedom from being invisible. Freedom from being the daughter who only mattered when money was involved. I looked at the tiny flame dancing on the candlewick and felt a soft, certain strength settle in my chest. This time, I hadn't chosen them. I had chosen myself. They didn't expect my next move, and they were never prepared for a version of me that finally chose herself.